Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Hello. I'm Jacinta.
Hi, Jacinta. How you doing?
Good.
I'm Christine. Nice to meet you, Miguel.
How you doing, Christine?
Thanks for being with us, for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, thanks for setting this up. It's a pretty awesome program. I like that you guys are taking it, to the personal connection with everybody.
So the first thing we'd like to ask you is if you would tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, where you're from, a little bit of your personal background.
My name is Miguel Horn. I'm from Philadelphia. I am of Colombian and Venezuelan roots, heritage. My parents are both South American, and I'm first generation raised in the States.
Could you tell us what your typical art practice looks like?
My practice is typically heading to my studio in Parkside, West Philadelphia, and I have a pretty tool-heavy physical process, construction-based, object-based practice. I build with computer and traditional techniques. So a lot of times I will be doing some prototyping with computer-based processes. I'll be in front of the computer for a while, and then I'll also be in the shop or in my studio space, generating content and so it's kind of a back and forth. I get some downtime away from the physical process, and then I have some time. And so I have a nice balance of the kind of light duty and heavier duty process, fabrication process.
So you were recently in a Philadelphia sculptor show, the Flow Show, and you did submit an image of the head that was in the water. It's titled Abu.
That's probably one of the strongest pieces I've done to date. It was definitely a very ambitious piece. It was about 8 feet tall. Acrylic laser cut construction, and it was made up of over 2,500 individual pieces that created this topographical form of my dad's likeness. And I made that in response to it was a really personal piece to me. I made that in response to some health complications that he experienced last summer when he was diagnosed with blood cancer. There's all these kind of unknowns that were going on before we got the diagnosis. So at the time, I thought it was a really appropriate way to honor him and his memory. The river posed a really interesting kind of collaborator for that piece because the tide cycle completely obscured the image at different times of the day. And I like the idea that you could kind of try to experience this piece and just have a glimpse of it or the full picture, depending on when you experience it and how that relates to, our own memories and how, present they are or distant they feel. So that I think a lot of people really connected with the personal connection to us, somebody in their life or somebody that is or was important in their life. And it was really well received.
I love that piece. So thank you for talking about it.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to see it before it disappeared?
Of course.
Such a fitting end to that thing. It just got destroyed.
Yes.
And that was heartbreaking to watch and, try and control. But I actually did piece it back together. So it's in the shop. It's in my studio right now. And I don't know, maybe it's not destined to have like a public presence right now because I was going to show it in April at Fleischer for the Wind Challenge. Yeah. So I was really hyped for the Wind Challenge, and this was I fixed it, put it all back together, and then 3 weeks before the show, it was like, well, this is canceled. So someday.
It'll happen. Another piece that I also saw in person was part of the Art in the Open piece where you sculpted foam.
Yeah, that's an interesting piece because it's a prototype. So I thought of it always as kind of like a process, a production phase where I was figuring out material use, the thickness and the kind of resolution and scale, and working in like a very uncontrolled environment. So, along the Schuylkill banks and there's this pier or this pylon that's left over from a bridge. And I thought that was a really interesting architectural relic. So I wanted to engage with that. And I designed this whole computer model based off of a tiny maquette that would interface with this piece So the model was only 10, 12 inches tall, and developed it to be 10 feet tall in real life. And the test was to see if I could figure out how to make something work without any, using just these methods. And then, assembling it on site in person was a different challenge. It was like a rainy, windy weekend, and it was styrofoam, so pieces were flying down the side of the path. But it was this person that was engaged in this struggle that was, either trying to push this wall into place or push it over. And I think the public really connected with that. There was a lot of like runners and joggers and cyclists that it's the only hill on that path. So people would like stop and be like, yeah, this is great. Just got to push through. It's just what we need. So I thought that was a fun way to interpret it. But it was a prototype for a public piece that I have been working on for a number of years. And I wanted to find out what scale would work right for, a large public installation like that.
Well, that kind of leads me into my next question, which is, what are you doing to stay creative right now? And are you working on any projects at the moment?
That's a tough one. I'm not really being that creative or productive at this time. My situation is I have 2 young children, 2 and 4 at home, and my wife is working full-time. She's in healthcare. So I am the mandated child caregiver to our 2 kids. And so our creative practice is kind of exploring every remote corner of every park in this region. And that's been pretty interesting, actually. I've come across some really great places that I've known about or driven past, and growing up here have known about. So I spend most of my day, I think, in a way that's trying to keep an interest in nature with my kids. So we're going to like the Pavilion in the Woods and Fingerspan and Wissahickon, and like all these sculptural installations in public spaces or green spaces, and like doing picnics there and talking about why I find this interesting. And, they're just half listening to me. And it's a way for me to try and keep engaged in my head in the game, and also, find exciting things for my kids. I have a ton of work in my studio just waiting to get at, and I'm like chomping at the bit to get out there. So hopefully I can reestablish a practice of a 9 to 5, but currently I'm spending about 2 hours a day, attending to admin, applying for grants, looking for relief, spending some evenings on the computer, working on computer development processes that I need for my work. That's about what it is. It's
awesome.
frustrating. I see a lot of people like pouring all this energy into their practice and into new pieces and new work. I feel like all those seeds are there, maybe for future time.
How do you think artists and art is beneficial during this time?
Well, I think, artists are kind of the antennas that are always kind of like feeling out what's on the horizon. And if anything, I feel like this is bringing a huge amount of empathy and love and care back into our communities, and artists that are working in practices that are tuned into their practice, I feel like are going to forge, these new bonds or stronger bonds with the public. And I can't really see us as a society interacting with spaces and institutions in the same way. And the conversations I've been having with other artists and, friends about what are we doing and where is this going is already trying to reinvent how we're communicating our content with the audience. And I don't see the robust fairs coming back in the way that they were financially, or, I don't see the appeal of that kind of public audience. So, I feel like the commercial market for art is going to take a hit. And then, we have to kind of reevaluate our priorities. Another
question we have is, what is your dream project?
I have like multiple dream projects that I I'm constantly chasing, maybe like distractedly, chasing. And I have my like dream project has always been to have a large public installation here in Philly, my hometown. And that's kind of what I have in front of me that I'm working on. It's one of these things that every time that all engines start firing, something else derails the momentum. So I was literally just, finally into full swing in production when the pandemic shut everything down. And I was just like, okay, great. What's the next thing that's going to, derail this thing? But it's actually coming together in a really astounding way. And I'm happy to see that come together physically and kind of finally see that. So, one dream is to see that finish soon. I was actually talking with a couple other artists about engaging some of the natural spaces in and around Philadelphia in a way that, as there's this kind of newfound appreciation for all these green spaces, thinking about engaging them in some kind of sculptural or installation based, something like art in the open, but not as present, kind of more like a remote.
That sounds lovely. I believe that will come into being. I think that's going to happen. That's amazing. Is there art that's happening right now, or is there an artist that you're really inspired by or excited about?
Yeah, I actually thought about this quite a bit, and I had a really great opportunity to meet some graduating artists from this year's kind of thesis class at UArts when I was giving a talk there, and thinking about what they're working on and the place that they're in right now and how they're tackling and overcoming this, I found to be super inspiring. And, just you think about how hard it is to come out of art school and make that transition and just throw a crippling economic crisis and pandemic on top of it, which is kind of what a lot of us faced with the Great Recession. I feel like there's artists that are gonna come out of this with such a profound maturity in their work, the kind of resilience in tackling changing the whole educational format and just rolling with it. It's pretty inspiring to see that in young students and young artists. So I'm looking forward to see what this generation of graduating students kind of comes up with.
Definitely. I'm excited to see that too. Yeah. What books would you recommend to artists, especially those young artists right now?
I try to put myself in that position, and I was exploring not only my core values of what I had studied and where its place was, and what the importance of craft and all of the things that I held really important to my practice. And I was reading at the time Art in the Age of Motorcycle Maintenance, and that was a pretty fun story. I ended up taking that a little too seriously and went on a super long motorcycle trip, but I think that there's some sage wisdom in that book. A friend of mine actually suggested that I pick up The Plague, and I thought, yeah, that would be actually pretty appropriate right now to read. That's my next book on the chopping block.
What kind of advice would you give to artists right now, or what's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
To be honest with yourself and with what's important to you, and that ultimately that's going to come through to with your work, and to stay true to that. And I think it's easy to get distracted, and it's easy to have your interests kind of pull you in different places, but just being honest with why you're doing what you're doing, and nobody can ever take that from you, and you can't go wrong.
Solid advice. The last question's a fun, light question. If there were no limits and you could live with any piece of art, what piece would you love to live with?
I was kind of stumped with this because it's a toss-up. I would love to have an Anselm Kiefer piece, just like a massive installation, if there was no spatial constraints, just like this giant thing. Or Antony Gormley, actually. I would love to have an Antony Gormley piece. That's one of my favorite artists. So.
Fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, culture. I mean, it's easy, right?
Yeah.
Just have a giant yard somewhere.
Yeah, your house would come with the dream art piece, of course.
Yes, of course.
You would
Sure.
wherever you lived, whatever it is.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Stay well.
Stay well.
Yeah, we'll do.
Get the rest.
Good luck with the rest of the interviews.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
All right. Take care.
Bye.